Sup Frosties, today we're going to be doing a very requested guide, and that's the Shackles guide. See, Shackles. Now I need to get out of them. Glad I got the keys this time. Some people may be asking, oh my goodness, Rage Badge is back. Are you back for good? No, I was never gone. But no, it's good to be back from my hiatus. I did talk a little bit more about this in the Discord, but let's just get on to what we're going to be talking about, the Shackles. Shackles is definitely one of my more liked classes. It might be like it's in the top 3. So I love this class and I've been super enthused about it. I've started writing this guide several months ago and kind of took a hiatus, and now finally we're back. But ultimately it is one of the most enjoyable classes, but I understand why people want a guide for it. There's a lot that goes into it. We'll get into the concepts here in a second, but I definitely think it's one of the more complex classes. It's definitely one where you can kind of on paper understand the concepts on how to play it very quickly. As a matter of fact, I don't think it takes a genius to figure out exactly what the class is all about, but the proper execution definitely is where the hard part is. So that's where I come in, and hopefully this guide will help you, teach you how to play it, and as well as I have a few builds and some sub builds, so we'll get into that. Remember to like and subscribe. It does really help the channel out. And if you want to support the channel, be sure to, the best way to do that is Patreon. I do apologize. The Patreon benefits have been kind of crappy since I took my mental health break. I do apologize to patrons for that. Don't know what, but if you want to support us, that's the best way to do it. Also, we have a Discord where we talk about, I'm going to be honest, it's more Helldivers nowadays than it is other stuff. I'm not playing, but my friends do. And there's like an active group that plays it a lot. So anyway, that exists. Let's just get to the video. So the Pain Conduit is a medium hit point deceptive, medium hit points though, and 10 card class. This is a little weird because you do get a perk, and I consider it a mandatory perk that gives you 5 extra hit points. As a result, at max level, you're actually going to have the same hit points as tanks, and during much of the game, you'll actually have more hit points than the tanks. Which wow, that sounds really powerful. But what it really boils down to, it just means you use your health as a resource a lot. Or you perform effects that cause your health to become a little bit more of a precarious position. So primarily the class focuses on suffering damage from its own effects, taking damage from other people, and redirecting them. Alternatively, redirecting, giving, or interacting with negative conditions. So primarily, and it's usually direct damage, but some of the ones are clearly attacks, such as Agony of Others, which we'll get into later. But the idea is damage gets moved around, or reflected, or prevented, or, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. Or conditions are getting moved around, redirected, or given. And plenty of cards are just give yourself conditions, so, or suffer damage. So there's a lot that goes into this class, and I think a lot of people are going to want to, like, oh, I can dip in everything, but sometimes it's better to little focus a bit. So we're actually going to be talking about, I think we're going to like funnel it down to 4 builds-ish, 3. I kind of have my own question marks after I did reread on my guide, but there's going to be 2 striker builds. Specifically, there's going to be a striker build focusing more on the Agony of Others and just stacking, tossing out conditions on enemies that are really effective at dealing damage. Primarily, it's going to be either throwing out damage, wound, and poison. And then there's going to be the striker build that focuses entirely on just dealing direct damage. So when you're fighting like wind demons and flame demons, yeah, it's really great because you don't even need to worry about that. Also, I need to check with someone on an FAQ because I swear some of these cards can be actually effectively do damage to invisible targets, but that's where Dwarf will comment and correct me in the comments about it, but it doesn't say target, so I have a feeling it's viable. Anyway, point is, you have 2 striker builds. We're also going to have a controller build that focuses a little bit more on the idea of using your status effects, the conditions that you're giving enemies for crowd control, and just kind of mitigating incoming damage that way. And as well as there's going to be a defender build starting at level 2. And the defender build primarily focuses on a little bit of the controller build, but you're going to be taking the hits of others and healing yourself. This is especially good with summon characters, especially with summoners that like Prism or the Bone Shaper, when the Bone Shaper is using a big bad big bad guy instead of just spawns of skeletons. Because when you do swarm of skeletons, you want them to die, and you don't care if like they survive or not for a lot. But if you want to keep a big guy alive. So, but there's a couple of those summon builds that really love the defender version of this. So that's but that one's really, once we get to Infection Purge at level 2, that build is really contingent on that card existing. So I don't think anyone even unlocks this class before, you have a high enough prosperity to make level 2 characters. So I do consider all of these 4 builds playable from the get-go. So there's a lot that this class does effectively well, and the big thing is I do think it's one of the most powerful classes in Frosthaven, exclusively because it doesn't have a lot of things that screw up its plan, and sometimes some of the most annoying enemies actually can make this character more powerful. Like sometimes you're like, oh no, we're gonna get brittled. This character's like, oh no, we're gonna get brittled, yay! It's very odd, but you kind of have to plan a little bit around the scenario. But usually, instead of other people who like, okay, I need to bring this card because otherwise the scenario is gonna screw me. Oh no, you're thinking, oh, how can I turn the scenario in my favor? It's kind of a different perspective. Since there are a few scenarios that actually completely screw you over, but there's a lot of scenarios that give you things to work with. You'll be primarily giving yourself conditions and suffering damage from your own cards, and you'll kind of supplement that a little bit with like maybe items or working with allies. But sometimes if the scenario provides it, you can use it against the scenario. So like the other guys, I do want to go over a couple concepts before we dig into it, and I will be talking about a few cards in the process. I'm going to be talking first about condition management. There are a lot of cards that trigger off of either having conditions, and as a result, either giving them to enemies, transferring them to enemies, or getting empowered effects by having conditions. The one big striker build that I'm talking about, the condition build, is going to be where you want to put stuff on yourself, give it to enemies, and use the Agony of Others. Because the Agony of Others is a relatively weak attack. Also, this is kind of built into the perk deck as well, because there's a couple perks that have this same effect. But if you consume fire, you get +1 attack for every condition currently on you at the time, which is kind of bonkers, not gonna lie. Because it's very easy to get two on you, so it's incredibly easy to turn this into a level 1 attack 4 range 3 with a ceiling far higher than 4. Like a lot of cards kind of cap out at that, but that one's really good. But the idea is stack as much on you, and usually you can use it with other stuff like Shared Affliction, which we'll get in a second, to give that to enemies. But this is where the effect gets amplified by the number of conditions on you. But then you have cards like, I think, Shared Affliction. The top and bottom both do different things. The top just says every time you perform an attack, you, barring a few conditions, you always give the enemy those conditions as well. So part of it is, congratulations enemy, you're getting conditions. And there's so many cards that say, here enemy, take this condition. So primarily there are give the enemy conditions, and some of them are give conditions that are on you. The bottom of Shared Affliction actually says remove a condition from you and put it on an enemy. So you'll sometimes have those transfer effects. The bottom of Shared Affliction being one of the most powerful ones in the game, and the top is a very key card for some of these builds as well, just because it's just that powerful. But the idea of, like, say you're disarmed and being like, oh no, I'm disarmed for the turn. Wait, no, I'm not. The enemy now has the disarm. Now you're free up for its top attack for it, and that enemy is no longer attacking. Everything seems to like work in such huge pairs if you're able to actually do that effectively. But primarily that's what you're going to be doing for some of these condition effects. Once we're going to get to them specifically on a card by card basis. Once we get through the level 1 cards, I'm also going to be talking about the builds and effectively how they supposed to play the cards as well. Also because some people requested it on the Coral guide and the Trap guide, I'm going to go over a couple of ideas on how execution is made for these. So you can come up with how to set up a turn and then execute it, because I think that would be helpful. And some people asked for it, so you're getting it. The next concept is suffering damage. This is the part that like really gets me, and this is the part where I need to be FAQ'd, and I don't feel like Googling it right now because I'm recording, and I should have looked it up earlier. But whenever I see these cards that say an enemy within range suffers X damage, it doesn't say target, so I really think you can use these on invisible enemies. A. B. It ignores retaliate, and yeah, that's it. But the idea is you have a lot of ways to make enemies suffer damage. You have a lot of ways to make damage suffer yourself, and you have several ways to say, when I take damage, something else either takes the damage instead, something takes the damage also, or you can redirect damage that allies take to you, which can often trigger other effects. So you can kind of make some of these chain reactions, especially it's like whenever allies take damage, you take it instead, and then also say whenever you take damage, X happens. So you can say, hey, that ally, you take nothing. So that enemy, you can really do some screwy stuff with that. So be careful on how things are phrased, because some of them are like, give an enemy condition, transfer one, remove a condition from yourself and give it to an enemy, and so on and so forth. So just be aware of the phrasing of cards, and don't worry, when we go through the cards, I'll go through those. But those are kind of the two concepts. Also, I just want to make a note on self-healing. This class has significantly more self-healing than other classes, but I think it's a lot of them you want to put yourself in more precarious positions, and a lot of your effects give you negative conditions and damage, to the point where the increased health pool and the increased self-healing is more so resource management rather than, oh my god, you're such a good healer. Like, you're not. It's really just a mitigating factor and not necessarily an above the others kind of thing. So let's get into the cards. Shared Affliction. So I already talked about this a little bit, but let's talk about the bottom first, then the top. The bottom is a move 3, remove 1 condition from you to give that to an adjacent enemy, and then you infuse Wind. First off, Wind is primarily used for condition builds and like for the controller or leader, but you're going to need it. But move 3, infuse Wind is already fine, but also it removes a condition. This is especially good for particularly annoying conditions that are on you that you want to fall off. Notice there is no restriction on it. Thank you, Maisie. Notice there's no restriction on it, so you can give the most annoying conditions like Bane, Brittle, Disarm on this. You could do Stun, but it does require a specific card for Stun to work, because most of the time when you're stunned, you're not going to be able to take actions. Keep in mind this class does have a way around that, because of course. But keep in mind, since it removes the negative condition, it's no longer plaguing you, and it's giving that to the enemy. As a result, you're going to be using this bottom. I actually never didn't bring this card to a scenario. Even when I tried more of a direct damage build or a full-on condition build, I always ended up bringing it, so I do consider this a core card. Just for the bottom. The top is something that's not going to be used by all builds, but it says every time you perform an attack, and all of your attacks are ranged attacks, I don't think there's any melee in here. Whenever you perform an attack, if it isn't Bane, Brittle, or Stun, add all those conditions to the attack. So what I liked doing with this is how easy it is to just add, for example, Immobilize Wound and Poison onto stuff. It's very easy to give yourself those conditions. With Delayed Malady, it's very easy to give enemies like Disarm with this, which is fun. Because Delayed Malady, I would use that with attacks and just start spamming as many attacks as possible and like disarm every turn. 5 consecutive turns of disarm makes it really amazing. So the whole point is this one doesn't need 5 turns. It's going to last the whole scenario. But if you are performing attacks specifically to deliver the negative conditions on you to the enemy, the top is the go-to. It's very easy because a lot of your cards are already very good. Ultimately, it's kind of a core card, especially for one of the striker builds, which we'll get to when we get there. The next card in order we're going to go do is Line of Transference, which is another almost core card. I'm going to talk a little bit. Oh, I completely forgot to talk about Initiative. So on Initiative 25. Normally, probably not a big thing to write home about, but frankly, this class's initiatives generally suck. Also, there's like some Retaliate cards later that are like in 60, 70, or 80. I forget which one it is, but Retaliate on Initiative late is bad. So you have to pair these with early initiatives, which you don't have much of. There is one X card later, Scarred Effigy, that has Retaliate and good initiative. So like there is some ways around it, but 25 is kind of that. And not only that, but you don't have gigantic moves without drawbacks. So move 4 with no rider is like, hi, it's just good. Initiative 25 move 4 is good, but the top is incredible. I do remember, like, so attack 2, range 3, which is slightly undertuned, but it does allow you to remove a negative condition from yourself. And a lot of times I do this on a turn after I'd immobilize myself, then ranged attack, immobilize an enemy, and boom, that was it. Also, if you have Wind, which is very easy to get, you can turn it into an attack 4 with 1 experience. So, if you have Wind and a negative condition, which are 2 those are very easy to do. Very easy to do things. You remove a negative condition from yourself, perform an attack 4 at range 3, and give the enemy that condition. Which is notably overtuned for a level 1 card, but it has 2 conditional like riders to it. You need wind or air. You need air and you need a negative condition on you. I do think that those conditions are insanely easy to pull off to the point where I don't consider it that big of an ask, and I consider this to be one of your strongest cards. And I think it's also one I used a lot. It may have brought it every scenario, but I don't hold me to it, but it's one I used a lot. It's almost a core card. Transferred injury. So this one's got a lot of fun text on it. Heal 1 at range 3. The cool part about this is you can actually use this to clear some effects with this if you really need to. But then for every element you have, which is fire and air, which is the elements that you use. I guess I didn't really talk about the elements in the setup section, but you use fire and air, by the way. You can increase that healing by a certain amount, 1 each, and then you perform an attack X equal to the amount you healed. At worst, it's a heal 1, attack 1, which is not good, but you can turn this into a heal 3, potentially more depending on cards. We won't get into those spoilers right now, but the idea is the more you heal, which is primarily from elements, the more damage you can deal. This ends up being pretty solid. I wouldn't say that this is incredibly good. The initiative 74 is not bad, but it's a solid card, if only because of the kit. Also, the bottom is really good. So when I said it's not that good, I mostly meant the top is something you'll use sometimes because you'll generally be wanting to like clear wound and recover some of your damage effects. I do think like the damage striker will use this more often since it allows you to help fuel your resource and do some damage. But the bottom specifically allows you to perform heal 3, range 3. You can use this to heal yourself if you've done too much damage to yourself, heal a friend if they need it. Also, you wound yourself. Now, wound yourself typically would be a drawback. I don't think in most classes it would be a negative rider. I think it's a bonus rider in this. This is primarily how I ended up one of the cards where I'm like, hey, I'm going to heal myself to shrug that damage off, give myself wound, then I'm going to attack, remove the wound, and give that wound to an enemy. Stuff like that. Or I'm going to attack and just give them to enemies with shared affliction. So this is one of your primary ways of generating wound for yourself. Because I almost think like the negative conditions as like infusing elements, you need to find ways to infuse them on yourself, if that makes sense. And this is one way of infusing wound. And the next card is going to be a core card for one of the striker builds for the condition striker. And the attack 2, range 3 is bad, but then if you consume fire, you get an experience, and the attack is increased for every negative condition you have. It's incredibly easy to get 2 or 3 conditions, so an attack 4, attack 5, range 3 at level 1 non-loss is very easy. Very easy. I don't want to, like, it's like, oh no, you need to infuse fire and have conditions. Trust me, remember I said earlier, like, you need a condition and infuse wind? No. That's easy. This one's also easy. So what I'm trying to say is, this one, don't overlook how much damage this can actually poke out. And like I said, for the condition striker, we're primarily going to be building around this and the perk that simulates its effect and adds it to other attacks. So one problem I did have is your way of infusing fire is sometimes a little finicky, but you get burned at both ends at level 3. That really helps out in my opinion. So just keep in mind, once you level up, the level up cards are generally what you're going to be using for your fire builds instead of your level 1 cards, just for your information. The bottom effect of the Agony of Others is really powerful because the next 3 sources of damage an enemy also suffers them. Keep in mind, this is really powerful, especially once you get to higher levels. There's one card that's like you can suffer up to 4 damage, and you're like, cool, I'm going to suffer 4 damage. And speaking of burned at both ends, with the bottom of this, the top of burned at both ends says you can suffer up to 4 damage to make an enemy suffer 4 or an equal amount plus 2. So one of my favorite things to do with this is use the bottom of Agony of Others. So I'd suffer 4 damage, then because I suffered 4 damage, the enemy would suffer 4 damage, and then for the effect of the card, they'd suffer 4 plus 2 damage. So it'd be like, hey, I take 4, you suffer 10, that ignores shield. Boy, was that fun. So this one's incredibly usable. Also, Bane. There's been times where I let Bane and Hammer Potion land on me just to be able to slam out burst damage. You definitely have to plan this out a bit, but also if you see that there are enemies in a scenario that just do high damage values, consider using the bottom of this just as a way of tanking those bouncing back and just like kind of killing them, because you have a crap ton of healing to recover from those effects anyway, that this very easily goes over what I consider the normal limit of like a lot of level 1 losses end up being like somewhere in the like, for if they're good, in the 7 to 9, and this one very easily gets to like easily past 9 suffer damage, and that's notably better than like attack damage because it breaks through shields. So anyway, this is a core card for some builds. I'm gonna basically really hype up a lot of cards is what I'm trying to say, but this is a really good one. The next card, Unending Torment. This one is another core card. Yeah, you keep saying that a lot. Trust me, this one's good. Heal 5 self is what it does. Initiative 29 is usable no matter what. It's just really good. But the top allows you to immobilize yourself to infuse fire and get an experience. The bottom allows you to muddle yourself, infuse air, and get an experience. So no matter what, the card is heal 5 self, which is just really good. It's strong because in general, because of what you're going to be doing, you will be suffering either extra damage or a lot of damage, and you're going to need to come up with ways to recover from that, so you don't just go through your initial health pool, die, and then just lose a ton of cards. But there are ways to use this. Keep in mind that if you do like get into position and use the top half, heal yourself, infuse fire, and mobilize yourself, this is usually good for the next round. When you're immobilized, you can use some cards to either buff them up. For example, the Agony of Others, who needs fire. Not only that, but you're immobilized, so it adds 1 to the Agony of Others condition anyway. Also, if you do want to give enemies immobilized, this is one of the ways to do it. And the bottom of it is one of your big ways to get muddle. Keep in mind your modifier deck isn't necessarily like super great, so the muddle self sometimes ends up being a problem. Also, if you're doing like more of a suffer damage build, the muddle usually doesn't mean much, so you can very easily spend a top action to do damage and then spend the bottom action to heal and muddle yourself, of which you're not going to do. A lot of the true, like the suffer damage, true damage, I think I've heard Nith say that before, true damage. A lot of the suffer damage builds usually uses fire, so technically the bottom is usually better for a condition build anyway, but you can't have everything. But the initiative is very nice. This is a core card that I brought this is one I brought every scenario. So it was this and Shared Affliction. Those 2 cards I brought to every scenario and didn't look back. This is fantastic. Blood Ritual. So this is just primarily a striker card. Attack 4, range 3 isn't... I mean, it's good. It's a very good. But you also do 2 damage to yourself. This can be good and bad. It's kind of a drawback because you'll suffer some damage, but it's also kind of hard to bitch about attack 4, range 3 with no riders. There's no conditions. You're just going to do an attack 4. There are ways that when you suffer damage that you can trigger this, so that's another way to do it. It's not terribly exciting. Initiative 56, normal attack with a little bit of damage that doesn't really have a lot of stuff you can do with, but it's something especially striker builds will bring for a while just because it's easy damage. It's free real estate. The bottom of Blood Ritual is used primarily for condition builds, for the controller or the condition striker. And primarily that says whenever an ally within range 3 would gain a negative condition, you may gain it instead. So one of my favorite parts about this is with a Geminate. Geminate has, especially once you get to the level 6 where the Geminate can brittle itself. Yeah, that's amazing. But there's several ways, or the perk that allows the Geminates to brittle themselves. You can always brittle yourself and then give it to an enemy. It's like you're like bouncing brittle around, like, oh no, I should have brittled myself. No, I'm not brittling myself. I'm brittling the pain conduit. No, the pain conduit's not getting brittled. The enemy is. Huzzah! So it's just really great. But that one's a little bit more difficult to use, and you have to kind of have a little bit of synergy or the right scenario. So this is very much a sideboard card for condition builds, because if you don't have the right ally, they're probably not getting negative conditions. If you're not in the right scenario, they're probably not getting conditions, so on and so forth. So a lot of the damage strikers are going to be taking the top for that, and the bottom is going to sideboard that in depending on if a condition build needs to get those conditions. Also, if you do need to get that primarily for the damage striker for Agony of Others, this is one easy way to just leech things off. Also, if you're like keep on wounding yourself anyway, you can also use this as a way to prevent your allies from being wounded, because you can say, I'll take it even if they already have it. You can take the wound. You'll get wounded again, and it doesn't matter when you stack wounds. So it's kind of a defensive build. The leader will also be taking this as well. Scarred Effigy. I've used this top a couple times. Primarily, it's a very weak attack 1, move 2. It's heal 7. It does ignore retaliate, but it can do just a little bit of damage over time. But whenever it suffers damage, you can choose to suffer damage. This is something you can play around with. I think I'm gonna be honest. I'm not a big fan of the summon. I'm pretty sure there's other ways to work around it. I've only used it a couple times, but I found that a lot of the effects work better when you're working with them yourself. So yeah, there's that. The initiative's 19 is really incredible, so you're going to be taking that for the initiative regardless. But the bottom, move to retaliate 2. You're going to get a little bit more retaliate cards later, but remember how I said sometimes you're going to want to position yourself to take the damage? If you can, if you have the bottom of Agony of Others up, you can be like, okay, next time I take the next 3 hits. Like, okay, I took 5 damage from this Algok. The Algox takes 5, also suffers 2 from retaliate. You can see this quickly adds up to just dead enemies. So this is especially good for the leader build or the true damage build that's kind of building around that. But what I'm trying to say is the initiative 19 is probably the main reason you're bringing it, but there are other ways you can use the retaliate. But I didn't actually end up retaliating as often with the other builds, so it's a good, first off, I'm not down on it. I don't think the summon is good, and I think that initiative 19 is usable, so it's just a good card, but overall it's fine. Explosive Wounds. 43 initiative. Ugh. 43 initiative isn't great. I wanted to like this card more, and this is another one. Please comment and say, Alice, you're wrong. I've done this with this card, and it's amazing. So anyway, move 2 and cleanse an ally and take all their conditions. That's usable in some cases. I'm going to be honest, there's so many times where allies just don't want to get conditions or heal themselves or stuff that it's hard to steal conditions from them. So I think this is going to require a specific synergy. And then you target an ally within range 3, and then every enemy adjacent to that and that ally suffer 2 damage or 3 damage if you have fire. So for part of my career, I worked with a character, like the first time I played this. Part of it is I worked with a character that did not like to, they wanted to be in melee, but they wanted to be invisible, so enemies wouldn't glue to them. They'd try to move around, or I'd end up playing with other characters that were only melee with usually 1 at a time, and I'm like, man, this is hard to do. I'm like, hey, can you hold still so I can damage you? I've used this a few times, but I found it to be generally a little underwhelming. So, it's nice. I feel like it wants to do a little bit more than that. I'm gonna be honest. If it was more of an attack, so we could pair it with some of the other builds, I'd prefer it than true damage in this case. So, I don't know. What I'm trying to say is I'm not a big fan of this card, but it's fine. Again, leave a comment to say, you're wrong, Alice, and here's why. Because I'd love to hear someone that actually played it effectively, because I can't help. I'm going to be honest, I played this class a bunch in testing, for Frosthaven testing 4 years ago, and I played this class more recently again, and another run. Anyway, whole point is in any of my run-throughs, I never really found this card to be that impressive, so I'm just wondering if it's a me thing or if it's that card. Onward. Cleansing Fire. All right, this is a card I generally like. 64 initiative's kind of crap, but it does give you fire, which primarily the damage build once. You're going to attack 1 at range 3, which is fine. You're going to wound the target, which is something good. Usually you want to wound yourself, and also you typically have the ability to wound yourself, so it's not necessarily all great, but then everything next to the target suffers a damage. This is something I found to be particularly useful, so it's a pretty good top. I wouldn't exactly say it's my favorite, but it is Generally useful. It does get rotated out pretty handily, though. Just keep in mind. So you're going to want to use other attacks than this, just because it's kind of weak. But it's got some good effects. It'll wound an enemy, which is kind of what you want, but you do really like having conditions on yourself. So, and it makes them all suffer damage, which we love suffer damage, and gives you fire, which we love. Again, like I said, the attack version gets outdated. The bottom is something I use notably more often for cleansing fire. Heal oneself. One of the biggest things is a lot of times where I'm like, okay, I need to recover. But how do I recover? Because I'm poisoned. I'm like, hello, I'm poisoned, muddled, immobilized, and wounded. I need to recover soon and let these summon conditions fall off. So there's turns where I use the top of Unending Torment to heal myself 5, but I'm like, well, I'm poisoned. So the best part about this is heal oneself. That'll get rid of the wound and the poison. Then you heal 2 self, and then you can use the top of Unending Torment to heal 5. So it's like cleanse all your conditions, heal 7 with that. So sometimes I would be like, hold on, I'm going to use this with boots, move 3, clear all my conditions, heal 7, so I'm closer towards the next thing. And like my friend who I was playing with, every time I do that, they're like, what the hell? I'm like, I know, I suffered a bunch of damage, I took a lot of conditions, but I'm okay now. Don't worry, next room I'm going to start it all over again. So this is kind of like my reset button. Especially good with poison, though, so I just want to point that out there. I also think that's why it's broken into that. I'm pretty sure Isaac, I forget the conversations that we had when talking about these classes, also primarily but just because I wrote up giant essays and didn't participate in as much of the discussions for these, but I do think that the heal 1 and then the heal 2 was primarily done as a way to allow you to heal yourself while still clearing the poison, which you will be giving yourself for fun. I don't think I've gotten to that card yet, but there's poison in here. Anyway, very good card. All right, Swift Vengeance. This card, in general, I used it for only a number of things. If I needed to loot during this, because sometimes there are scenarios where like you need to loot all the 4 chests and some of this, especially when I was playing the most recent run of Shackles with my friend, we actually resorted, due to a person quitting, down to 2-player. So when it's like, hey, you need to loot all 4 of these chests, I'm like, well, I better bring a loot because I can't, well, I mean, I could rely on him to loot all 4. He would totally have done that. Just naturally, he would have taken all the loot from me. He just really does that. He's really good at looting. I'm not bitter about it. No. But the idea of move 1 or potentially move 3 and loot 1 is pretty solid, though, at least. Especially because air's generally pretty easy to get and you only have like a couple spends on it at this level. And the initiative 21, which is, I've brought it just for that before, which feels really embarrassing, but I'm like, we really need to build up the outpost, so I'm going to bring it for the loot and the initiative. And the top exists. That's one of those, remember I said like the Agony of Others where more conditions gives you more effect? This is curse the number of enemies times the number of negative conditions you have. It's a non-loss, so it could be a lot of curses. I'm gonna be honest, I did not have enough conditions where I had a crap ton of enemies within range for it to pay off. And as a result, like whenever I've gotten to use it, it was like a curse to enemies get an experience. And I'm like, I feel like I could have just done some damage or killed enemies instead. So I'm a little down on the card, but I feel like maybe if you played more heavily in 4-player and played more of a condition build at the time, I'm pretty sure this one's usable. The bottom's usable and the initiative is regardless. So it's a pretty solid card anyway for that. A move on, just so I want to point out that in Gloomhaven First Edition, the idea of loots with no movement on them or top, like, you know, just the value of loots was annoying. So just having a move with the loot is really nice. Even if you're like, oh, I'm off by 1, congratulations. You can use loot boots. I didn't prep for this character, but you can turn this into a move 2 or a move 3 with boots or air pretty easily to get yourself in position to have a really optimal loot 1. So pretty solid. All right, now we're going to get into the X's. Delayed Malady. Okay, so this is a core card for a few classes. The top is, I don't know how to put, I don't think I used the top. The bottom is insane. So let's be real here. I'm just going to talk about the bottom and the initiative. The initiative's kind of late, it's very late, but you already have the ability to go late. So sometimes I'd be excited over a 90, but I'm not excited over this, just because you kind of have the ability to do that already. Anyway, let's just talk about the bottom. During this and the next 4 rounds, you cannot remove your negative conditions, and you're unaffected by them. So primarily what I do this with is either use Burned at Both Ends or a certain potion. Use Agony of Others, Line of Transference, or etc. to just give enemies free disarm or Shared Affliction. It adds disarm to all your attacks. That's bonkers. So that's the part I just love about this. During this and your next 4 rounds, you're unaffected by them. So allowing yourself to attack while disarmed is huge, because there's sometimes I'm like, oh man, I can do this attack, give the enemy, and then, oh wait, I'm disarmed. I can't attack. Okay, crap. This every time that would happen, I'd be like, aha, but Delayed Malady. And this is the reason why you use it. Delayed Malady is insane. It's incredible. So for that, also, the parts also, sometimes you're like, oh no, like I have wound and poison and all this other crap. I'm about to, like, if I get attacked, the idea of having brittle or poison and then it actually doesn't affect you, you're just as vulnerable as if normal person without those conditions, is huge. Especially because you're going to sometimes want to stack a bunch of crap on yourself, and you're going to want to not be able to suffer those effects. So Delayed Malady will give you that effect. Also keep in mind, Delayed Malady does make you stun immune and allow you to kind of transfer stun with the cards that allow you to give stun to any, like, it's just super strong. You don't really have, you have ways to get stun, but you're going to need to get them out of your toolkit. I'll look at the card later, but I don't think you can reliably give yourself disarm, but not stun. But whole point is for 5 rounds, you'll be able to freely do whatever you want. Also, you can heal yourself during this time, because poison doesn't block your healing. So not only does you don't need to like set up stuff with a cleansing fire, you can just heal yourself as you want, toss out all the conditions as you want. 5 rounds of just god tier behavior. For the condition build, this is kind of one of the core cards. Also, sometimes you're going to want to like get through the scenario till you want to actually play this. Don't be afraid to just use this as a default move too. So I'm gonna be honest, I brought this card a lot just to use the default move too. Went God mode at the end, and yeah, I think this is clearly one of the classes that my friend was like, holy crap, this is busted. Like, this isn't necessarily my opinion of the most powerful class, but I have it up there in the same tier. That class is just really strong. The other, I'm not going to talk about that class in particular, but it's just really strong overall, and it does have burst turns. But if you're doing the condition build with Delayed Malady with the right setup, sometimes this class just seems like for 5 turns you are ruining every enemy in the scenario. Like I was just having the time of my life with Shared Affliction, Delayed Malady, and just destroying everything. Just like, congratulations, you're not doing anything and you're gonna die in 2 turns anyway, but you're not gonna be attacking, so bye. Do this, and Waka's another one, like, oh crap, we're probably gonna have to reset. No, we're actually gonna handily walk through it. And I'm like, that's wrong. Pleasure and Pain, one of my favorite cards, 47's blah. Yeah, heal 3 yourself, and 1 adjacent ally, and 1 experience. So yeah, that's just something you're going to be wanting to do. Keep in mind, there's also a Diamond Plus pip on it, so you can actually add cool effects to that if you want. Especially because it's going to give it to yourself and your friend. Just food for thought. But the idea is it allows you to heal yourself, which you're going to need to be doing that quite a bit. And not only that, but you can kind of support your friends, and it's always good to be a friend to your friend. But ultimately, it's kind of recovery there with a balls bad initiative. Because balls are bad. Look up orchiectomy. Don't if you're like, never. Oh god. The bottom, move 2, and then you have to poison yourself and an ally within range 4. Keep in mind that you have to do this. This is a mandatory because you got the little extra turn, so you have to poison. The part about this I love is poisoning myself is usually like, yay, good thing. And that's nice. And then all enemies within range suffer 1 damage. So it's just a lot of, it allows you to slightly reposition, allows you to give yourself poison to your engine, and the enemies suffer damage. I think a lot of builds end up using this a pretty decent bit, but it's not like, oh my god, this is a core card and it's going to be lasting. No, it's definitely a card that gets added to a lot of rotations just because it does add a lot, and the top does a lot of healing. So I brought this in quite a few scenarios, not all of them, but quite a few. Also, it's one of those things where the Pain Conduit has a lot of cards that are more of like a toolkit. So if you need, like, for this scenario, if you need to heal things, if you're taking a lot of damage, play it for the heal. If you need to, like, apply poison and do some suffer damage, then just do that. It's both halves end up being cool. So a lot of times when you're resting, this is usually why I long rested a lot as the Pain Conduit, you are going to want to be losing the piece of your toolkit that is not going to be as useful for the rest of the scenario. So just food for thought there. But this is one of those where both halves have clearly different effects, but are both very strong, or pretty good, sometimes very strong. Unstable Effigy. So that is certainly a top. I'm gonna be honest, it feels a little bit out of, it doesn't seem to fit the toolkit. Like the idea of, hey, it's gonna blow up and infuse fire. Like this is cool. It makes sense, but I just rarely found a situation to make it work where I felt like that synergized well. It wasn't like it was a bad effect. It wasn't like I was like, well, that was, I don't know. It just felt like I would rather have spent that loss elsewhere. But Initiative 18, move 4, infuse wind, and then you mobilize yourself and all your buddies that are adjacent to you after the move. Usually I just found a way to just move. But the Initiative 18, move 4 is usually pretty great. Also, this is one of your key ways of generating a mobilize for yourself, although again, I found Unending Torment to be more reliable. As a result, yeah, this is end up being one of the few ways you can get around by using move 4. I know I said that like you've got line of transference, but a lot of times I didn't end up wanting to use the move for that because the top's really good. But yeah, so Unstable Effigy is good just for that. Gives you wind, gives you immobilize, especially with setting up line of transference, because the funny part is you can move 4, immobilize yourself, infuse wind, then use line of transference top to consume that air and turn that into an attack for immobilize range 3. It just works. Anyway, the initiative's good and the bottom effect's good. The top is a top, I guess. So we're going to talk about just the builds for a second. We have the Suffer Damage Striker, which a lot of the level 1 cards are going to be using similar level 1 builds. So they're not going to get more variants, but I'm going to talk about as we level up which each one does. The Suffer Damage is primarily going to find ways to take damage, bounce back to enemies, and take damage and just do raw attack values or raw suffer damage. The idea is the conditions are kind of more of a fuel to buff your attacks and buff your suffer damage rather than actually giving them to enemies. You'll still be wanting to do that, so you're going to be wanting to bring primarily damage dealing conditions, so wound and poison. So cards like Pleasure and Pain or Transferred Injury might be really critical to you, just to be able to give yourself poison and give enemies poison, just on the cards that do that. But also you'll want to use cards like Blood Ritual to, you're going to be easily to heal off the 2 damage, as well as once we get to the level 2 and 3 cards, you get some pretty neat suffer damage effects. So also there is primarily the Condition Striker that's going to be doing mostly shifting as much conditions onto the enemy, and you're going to want a slightly different toolkit as you level up. The 2 of them are slightly using the same cards at low levels, but the idea is one of them does most of the damage by trying to take as much damage as possible and using suffer damage, and the other one's primarily going to be evolving more into using one of the more powerful effects, including the level 6 card, where you're going to be trying to more every rest cycle dropping a Bane on an enemy, where that's not necessarily going to be every build's case. Then you have the controller build, which is primarily, for me, The controller build is highly focused on using immobilize and disarm and putting those onto enemies as fast as possible, as well as taking hits and healing yourself. So the controller build is kind of like a way of nullifying enemies while also doing a decent amount of damage to all of them, and you're going to speckle in some like damage AoE and other stuff in between. In general, it's kind of playing more of a support role, but this one is a really good build, and one I did actually for several levels because I was paired with one person who was very good at killing things. So I'm like, well, what if those things couldn't move towards you and kill you? What if that things couldn't attack that you're next to? And I just did that, and like a little bit of damage, and just things just died while my friend was like, man, all these enemies aren't very frightening. Yeah, they're not frightening if they all like loaded up with negative conditions. So the idea is nullify what the enemies are doing with your own conditions, and that's the controller. Then we're going to talk about the defender build once we get to level 2, primarily because we're going to be talking about the card, and my brain just stopped. We're going to primarily be talking about the card Infection Purge, which makes the defender build work. So that's primarily level 1. So without further ado, let's get into the level 2 cards. Of Reversal of Fate and Infection Purge. Let's talk about Reversal of Fate. I know probably people are not. I do the cards in the number. I sort them by the number they're ordered in the bottom left. So if you're wondering like why I do these things in a certain order, that usually means that you always get all the level 1s. This is not important information. Reversal of Fate. The top got me so excited until I saw the loss symbol. I don't know why I thought it was going to be a standard thing, because I'm like, wow, that's busted. Oh, it's a loss. But it's not bad, by the way. It's a good loss. Heal 5, range 4, bless. Not only that, because it can target anyone, you can use this on an ally that needs to like literally like, oh no, I'm about to die, here, heal 5, bless. Oh, that's nice. Or if you're in a really bad predicament, you can use this to heal yourself. Keep in mind, you might need to use it with Cleansing Fire to clear your poison first, so just an FYI. But also attack 5, strong, and curse. So I don't consider this necessarily a bad loss, but it's something I held off when I tried using it. So just keep in mind that. So that's in my opinion, it is a good loss if you compare it with a decent bottom half, because there are a lot of times where sometimes I like top losses, but the rest of the card, like the initiative or the bottom, doesn't work, that I ended up not using those losses. But sometimes there's just decent top losses that I bring only because the rest of the card makes it. So 23 initiative is pretty strong for the Pain Conduit, but the other effect is the next time, and it lasts forever, so it doesn't even need to be this round, but it's only got 1 charge. The next time you'd suffer damage, the attacker suffers an equal amount of damage. This is a really good setup for any of your striker builds. I know for the just the idea of, hey, hit me, boom, you're also taking that, congrats. Especially also for other builds. Here's the problem is like the leader build is probably going to want that, but they're going to have to pick up Infection Purge. As a result, there's a lot to really enjoy about this card, just because you will probably be positioning yourself in precarious positions. Man, that sounded precarious position. Anyway, as a result, you'll get a lot of use out of the bottom and the initiative. Infection Purge. This is something I really like because you and 2 enemies you suffer 1 plus X damage, where X is the number of negative conditions you have. Infuse Fire, get an experience. So not only that, but it gives you fire as a setup. But also, the part about this is you can kind of control how much damage you take and deal by just slamming the amount of negative conditions on yourself, or maybe not doing them in a specific order. The part I loved about this is Flame Demons die. It's very easy to stack 3 conditions, do 4 damage, and normal Flame Demons just die. Like, this is just a very strong setup. I know I was bitching about the Agony of Others not having enough reliable fire, but this is your reliable fire. Congratulations. Not only does it, you can stack some negative conditions on yourself, use this to have a payoff for the negative conditions, infuse fire, then Agony of Others as a payoff for those negative conditions, and use that fire. So this kind of ends up being part of your rotation. You're like, debuff myself, suffer damage, all of you, and then you take a big hit and like slam it out. It's just so good. So primarily for most builds using Infection Purge, you're going to be using the top because the bottom is solely for the leader build, which is a new build or a defender build, solely for the defender build. It's kind of like a defender leader build. I don't know how else to put it. I just call it defender because you're kind of taking the damage for others. So the bottom of it is whenever an ally within range 3 would suffer damage, you take the damage instead. The reason why this is really important is you can, as a defender build, take the hits for others. Now, this is really annoying. Like, man, for the Prism class that like sets these up, it's hilarious to watch it sometimes. Oh no, it's gonna die. No, it's not. That those two pair so well, if only because of this build and this thing. And that's something I absolutely love. Not only that, but if you are playing characters that are a little squishy and might be taking some damage, this allows you to play a Pain Conduit that is more tanky, alleviating pressure from your frontline friends and then tossing damage back onto the enemies. So this is something I absolutely love about this class because it allows you that option. Now, not a lot of builds are going to be using the bottom like that, so that's primarily only going to be for the defender build, but the top has end up being really powerful as this. So as a result, the striker builds both like Infection Purge just because it just does more damage. Both striker builds are going to be going for Infection Purge. The controller build is going to be doing Reversal of Fate because as a controller, allowing to reflect damage on enemies is perfect. Also, if you're going to be going more of a if you're going to be going more of a true damage build, you might actually pick like a true damage striker. You might want to pick Reversal of Fate for the bottom anyway, depending on how you're setting up tops and stuff like that. So if you're doing more of damage deal and less on conditions, the bottom might actually still be good for you. So I'm going to leave that up to you, but most people are going to pick Infection Purge. Also, the defender build picks Infection Purge because the bottom kind of allows it, very much allows it to do what it does. Level 3, this is where the card I love, Burnt at Both Ends. This is one of my favorite cards. And this is the part about the card I hate, is I love everything about it, so it's annoying to have to like lose one effect. Also with Infection Purge, this is another payoff for it. So you can now suffer up to 4 damage and then pick an enemy within range 3 to suffer an equal amount of damage. Dwarf, can you target invisible enemies with this? Tell me. But also if you have fire, you get an experience and they suffer 2 more damage. The funny part about this is we were in scenarios with like shielded enemies or stuff like that, or I remember we were fighting snow imps, and there was this annoying elite snow imp. We're about to like, okay, as long as they don't do that one card, we're gonna kill it. And my friend's like, I'm like, oh, if you don't, I'll kill it, but also I have another plan. So the idea is you could just, that annoying, oh no, we shield 5 self, take it. You can't block this. What do you think you are, Batman? I mean, Batman probably couldn't block it either, but like, whole point is this is a crap ton of direct damage that cannot be shielded, like even by those stupid steel, oh god, the automatons. Like this is one way to just punch through automatons, one way to punch through enemies that give you disadvantage or shield. This is just so good. And the bottom is move 3 and infuse fire, which already is good because you don't have enough fire infusion as is, and move 3 infused fire is nice, but it disarms you and an adjacent enemy. This is a lot of times where I'd set up by using Burnt at Both Ends bottom, run up to enemies, infuse fire to use for the next turn, and then disarm myself and the enemy. Then I'd like, okay, so you hold off there, you're disarmed. Then next round, I'm going to move around a bit. You're disarmed again, by the way, and just watch as the enemy just completely is unable to do anything, just unable to do anything. And I love that. The bottom is great. The top is great. The top is not super as universal. It's very good, but there's clearly other times where you're not going to need it as much, whereas the bottom is basically universal. This is probably one of my most favorite cards, just hands down. Although level 6 for the meme, Hopelessness is still, I think, my favorite. I'm gonna be honest. I've never had a card like make me actual burst out chest laughter from seeing it for the first time than Hopelessness. But this one's one of my favorites. Reprisal is one of the cards I didn't actually get to use a lot, but heal 2 self, retaliate 3, or retaliate 4. And this is the card, 70. This is the card I was trying to think of earlier, 70 initiative. Retaliate on a 70 initiative. That's balls. But at the very least, heal 2, retaliate 3 or 4. If you pair it with, for example, Scarred Effigy, this means that you can go at initiative 19, move 2, heal 2, retaliate 6. So if you're making the enemy pay for hitting you, this is one way to do it. I'm gonna be honest, I think we have more of like a I kind of want to do another build here that focuses primarily on like retaliate getting hit, but I don't think I made notes for it, but I'm gonna make it up as we go, because that's what I was thinking during Reversal of Fate. Is there's definitely some builds like the controller wants burned at both ends, but if you're doing more of a controller that wants to take hits, I guess it's kind of the defender. The defender is going to be taking that, so forget that. But Reprisal is very good for anyone who wants to be taking the hits, and you're taking the hits and dealing damage back. Both striker builds take burned at both ends. I do think that if you're going heavily on the attacking side, you may want to avoid disarming yourself until you have like more reliable ways to get the disarm, whereas the suffer damage build is probably doesn't give a crap about disarming themselves. And the defender build clearly takes reprisal, and the controller also takes burned at both ends for the disarm. I forgot to actually write my notes for this level, so I kind of had to make that part up, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Like, almost everyone takes burned at both ends except for the tank. The tank takes reprisal. Oh, I forgot to talk about the bottom of reprisal. I got so excited over it. Whenever you suffer damage this round, one enemy suffers 2 damage, which is great if you can. You don't even need them to attack. You can always just deal the damage to yourself, move 2, and make an enemy suffer 2 damage, which is generally pretty strong as is. Again, you have to be able to take the damage as is. So, you need to do it on people that will be taking damage. So like I said, the defender build absolutely is going to be taking damage basically every round, so reprisal works for it. Burned at both ends is just hard to pass up. The annoying part is reprisal isn't bad, but burned at both ends is just one of my favorite cards. Oh my goodness. Level 4, Down to the Dirt, Mirrored Misery. God, I love both of these so much. I did try Mirrored Misery for a bit and realized how much I really wanted Down to the Dirt, so I used that a little bit more later. Down to the Dirt's just very good. It's attack 2 at range 3, initiative 39, which I'm not enthused about. But attack 2 range 3 is kind of weak for a level 4 card, but wait, there's more. If you have low health, I wanted to say bloodied. I keep on wanting to use 4th edition terms. There's like, you keep on using striker, defender, controller, and stuff. Yeah, I know. But if you're bloodied, this is an attack 5, 1 experience, range 3, which is a perfectly good level 4 card. So the idea is you just want to get hurt. So for any classes that do a lot of damage to themselves, which is several of the builds, this is your payoff for it. Not only that, but the bottom is move 4, which is something you desperately need, and then you heal equal to the amount of negative conditions on yourself, which is a good way of, if you don't have poison, recovering some of your effects. It will knock wound off, just a heads up. But Down to the Dirt is definitely one of my it's pretty good, but I'm not in general. One of the big things is remember how infection purge at level 2, where you may suffer a lot of damage depending on the amount of conditions you have. This one allows you to heal equal to the number of negative conditions, so you can kind of bounce your health up and down with that. As like I said, your health is kind of your resource, but it's a pretty strong card. Mirrored Misery is not a card I said I was a little down on, but don't get me wrong, but it's not a remove condition. The bottom is one enemy gains all of the negative conditions except for like the 3 most annoying ones, which is frustrating, and it infuses air. So it's not a bad card, don't get me wrong, but giving enemy all the conditions you have is still pretty solid. On a initiative 72, which again, in any other class I'd be like, that's cool, but for this I'm like, man, we don't need to go that late again. The bottom is designate an ally and perform one enemy adjacent to the designated ally suffers X damage, where X is the difference between their, I'm like, you need to have an enemy that has a large hit point pool next to an ally who's mostly dead, and then you basically delete the enemy. It's huge when it lands and it sounds great. I can't actually imagine the amount of situations where I played that and I was like, yeah, that loss made my day. It was too hard to set up when I needed to, and I know it paid off once because I can't really remember the exact instant, but it sounded really good on paper, and it did not pay off nearly as much as I thought. The bottom would have been good, but the move 2 ends up being really problematic. Don't get me wrong. Wound 2, give an enemy all your conditions except those 3, and infuse air is really strong. So it's clearly a card worth taking, but the top is one of those that looks incredible, but actually is hard to use. Or maybe it's a skill issue on my part. Leave a comment if it is. All the builds are taking down to the dirt, except for the controller build, which is taking Mirrored Misery, simply because you do want another way to dish out those conditions over to other people rather than just relying on a very minimal number of cards, because guess what? This one says you get all of my negative conditions except these. This is another way of also disarming enemies, just a heads up. Oh yeah, and the Defender build. The Defender build goes back and picks Burned at both ends, I think, or down to the dirt, but you're probably not giving yourself, no, we're gonna just go back and pick Burned at both ends, I think. Level 5, we have Chained by Spite and Chained by Despair. They're both level 5, Initiative 15, and Chained by. Chained by. So you got fluffy little manacles, which are used for fun bedroom activities and not Frosthaven. Don't think about that. Chained by Spite. At the start of each of your turns, you may suffer up to 3 damage. If you do, one enemy suffers an equal amount of damage. We love it! If you weren't aware of the anything amount of damage dealing is getting really excited over that. And it just forever, you can just suffer damage. Not only that, but if you're in a particularly bad situation and you're like, oh no, you can always just say, I'm not taking any damage this round. So it's the fact that it's not mandatory, I think, is significantly huge. The bottom also is a move 3, retaliate 2, infuse fire, which is phenomenal. Gosh. Especially because you, like I said, the early level fire infusions aren't that great. This is it. This and Burned at both ends really help fuel your fire build. So if this is something you need, Chained by Spite is perfect. Not only that, but direct damage every turn is huge. So if you're just going full striker, Chained by Spite, just doing, oh my god, it is so funny how this could just delete like imps and flame demons. It's one of the best cards in the game. Chained by Despair is hilarious because like at the start of each of your turns, just choose to gain a negative condition. You can't pick Brittle or Bane. You can pick Stun. So remember how I said like you have trouble getting Stun in your toolkit? This is one way. When I did Chained by Despair with Delayed Malady, this was the hilarious way of doing it because I'd be like, hey, I'm getting stunned. Okay, but I'm not going to be stunned for the next blah time, so I'm just going to stun an enemy every time for the next 5 rounds. Enjoy, or the next 4 rounds. Enjoy. A stun with a shit ton of damage. This is it. Not only that, but you can gain whatever like condition you need to gap fill what you've lost. So like, oh no, my Immobilize fell off, but my Immobilize is in my discard pile. Congrats, just immobilize yourself with this. Do damage to them. It's that easy. I love it so much, like seriously. Now, of course, it is funny, but like, oh man. Anyway, move 3. The bottom it's Initiative 15, which you'll need in any build. But again, Chained by Spite and Chained by Despair both at 15. So you're not like making the choice of which one do I pick. Whenever an enemy gives you a negative condition this round, that enemy also gains that condition. This is harder to use, but it also gives you air. But the funny part is, if you position yourself like, hey, I'm going to put myself here, and these frozen corpses, they drew that annoying thing where they're going to run forth and brittle immobilize. Just funny, watch them just bounce them back on themselves. Gosh, it's just so comedic. Also, something I noticed is Chained by Despair, do that with the Snow Imps, and then do some of those direct damage things. You can watch them brittle you, and they're like, all right, all the Snow Imps take 3 damage. Oh, they just brittled themselves because of Chained by Despair last round. They take 6 because they brittled themselves. Comedy. Also keep in mind this has no restriction, so if they give you stun, brittle, or bane, this will bounce it back no matter which condition it is. Keep in mind that there are a lot of cards that do say do redirect it or remove it, but not bane, but not stun, stuff like that. So this one has no restrictions. No matter what they give you, they're getting it back. As a result, I do love this. The loss effect for it really allows you to buffet your negative conditions. Also, remember how you're like, oh, we need to have the conditions not fall off? Congratulations, this is an easy way to get them back on. So for the strikers, are going to split up here. The damage striker is going to do Chained by Spite. The condition striker is going to do Chained by Despair. The defender build is going to do Chained by Spite, because the bottom really helps set them up. And also they could use the top as a way to use extra resource if they want it. And the controller takes Chained by Despair as another way to bounce conditions around or repeatedly disarm themselves if they need it, or to stun themselves, which I know sounds hilarious. Like, in case you need to repeatedly disarm or stun yourself, only the pain conduit, Like I said, so that one's a pretty good split. Like, different builds just use that for different things. Although, I do like Chained by Despair is just, I think, more funny, but Chained by Spite I do think is overall a better card. If you're like confused, like, I don't know what to do. Chained by Despite is just hard to not use. Level 6, my favorite card, Hopelessness and Phantom Limb. Hopelessness. When I saw this, see, I'm already laughing. Oh my god. Bane Self. When I first saw this, back when Frosthaven playtesting, and I was like, what the why is this a thing? I mean, I know the class can do that. And then as soon as I started to explain, because I'm like, this is so stupid. This is the meme right here. Hopelessness, the meme. Yeah. But then as soon as I thought, well, if you shared Affliction it, this is a way to like just Bane and then give Bane to an enemy, then they suffer. Oh, and as soon as I started really thinking, I realized that this is actually a strong card. It's not just a meme. It's good. And I'm like, why on earth is Bane Self a good card? Yeah, it is. I'm so sorry. This video is like super long. Bane yourself. BYS. Please don't. And the bottom is move 6, take 4 damage. I'm not actually as enthused over that. Every time I took Hopelessness, I basically strictly used it for the top. I may have used that bottom. I don't remember using the bottom, but it's possible. I don't know. Who cares about it? Bane's Self is just too funny, right? Phantom Limb's the other card. Attack 3, range 3. This ability you can actually attack while disarmed. And if you do have disarm, it's actually an attack 5, range 3, 1 experience that infuses, and it also infuses air. This is huge, especially because there's several ways you want to build up having disarm to disarm enemies. You might be disarming yourself or giving disarm to it. This is one of the ways to perform an attack while still actually being able to deliver that to enemies. So I love the top of this, especially for those damage builds that also might be able to do that also might be disarming themselves, especially if you have the Chained by Despair. If you're going for like a controller build and you're like, oh no, my disarm fell off, you can give yourself disarm, Phantom Limb, and then get the powerful attack on it. It's just that good. And the bottom is a loss. Heal 3 yourself and all your buddies within range 2, which is pretty strong. And then everyone who recovered health as part of this performs an attack 3, which is amazing. It's a good conditional loss tied to a top attack that is just really good in most builds. So it's really hard to bitch about that. If you're going the striker build, Striker's going Phantom Limb. Condition effect Striker is going to be going for Hopelessness as a way to fuel their next attack to add Bane to it. Obviously, Controller's going Hopelessness, and the Defender again, see, I added the defender as a later thing because I wanted level 1 builds, and I forgot to add my notes for what the defender is taking. Probably Phantom Limb. Yeah, we're just going to say Phantom Limb. I mean, honestly, if you wanted to, Hopelessness is just fun, so you can take that. Level 7, Reject the Gift and Penance. Penance and Shackles on the same thing. Like, this guy's a little kinky. Reject the Gift. Whenever you had suffered damage this round, an enemy adjacent to you suffers that damage instead, and you gain 1 experience. So just imagine saying like, hi, I'm gonna get hit once, but instead I take nothing. That enemy suffers all of it, and I get an experience. It's perfect. Like the idea of, there's several cards that say ignore the next like damage you take this round, but the idea of ignore the next damage you take, the enemy takes the damage instead, and you get an experience. Huge. Also, initiative 20. Did you guys see that? Initiative 20. Initiative 20 is huge. So ignoring the rest of it, that's a pretty solid effect on initiative 20. Gosh, it's the funny part I like about that though is sometimes you do want to take the damage, but this is something that you wouldn't like. Sometimes you want to take the hit, so that kind of has some anti-synergy, but if it allowed you to take the damage, it wouldn't be worth a level 7 card. So it's still very good. I'm just saying, like, it does make me giggle. The funny part is, by the way, because the initiative 20, the other cards actually initiative is better, which I find it hilarious. Level 7 is just good for initiatives. And the bottom is move 3. Whenever you gain negative conditions this round, prevent those conditions. Penance. All adjacent enemies suffer 3 damage. We love to put ourselves in precarious positions and do true damage. And then if you have fire, all enemies suffer 4 damage instead, which is great, and we get an experience. And then you deal damage to yourself equal to the number of enemies that suffer damage. Funny part is, by the way, if you put yourself in really precarious positions, do a lot, you can take a lot of damage and bounce it back further onto enemies. So that one ends up being really strong. Also, initiative 12, come on. Direct damage on initiative 12, just being able to make enemies suffer damage is so fun. Bottom is move 1, retaliate 3, range 2, but it becomes retaliate range 3 if you have air. Air is definitely not mandatory. But the top is really good because it reminds me very much of one thing we loved about Burned at Both Ends. And there's a little bit more of a little restriction there personally. Also keep in mind that all these direct damage effects are really powerful. I'm very sure this one also breaks through invisibility as well. Initiative 12 is just really strong though. The bottom here wasn't as exciting. I like the top of Penance though. For the Striker build with conditions, they take Penance. All right, both Strikers take Penance. Defenders are kind of up to you. I'm gonna be honest, because the bottom allows you to retaliate to take hits. So if you are recovering and taking that, that's fine. But the top of Reject the Gift probably wins it. I'm saying I'm like leaning 60-40 towards Reject the Gift, because Reject the Gift at least allows you to go to the front, take a hit, not take the hit, and make the enemy take it. Whereas the bottom allows you initiative 12, which is something you desperately need, and a move with retaliate built in. So that allows you to get better effect from that stupid, annoying initiative 70 retaliate. Obviously, you're not going to use wind twice, so you're going to use it not for Penance, that's for sure. And the controller is going to take Reject the Gift as well. So but certainly not for the bottom, that's for sure. I really don't like the bottom of Reject the Gift at all. It just doesn't suit me. Level 8, Racked with Pain and Wave of Anguish. Racked with Pain, Wound Stun, range 3. My favorite combo of negative conditions, Wound Stun, compact on its own card together. And here's the funny part, if you're bloodied, if you're at or below him, you also brittle them. Here's the part that's annoying. Brittle and Wound have counter synergy. So it's like, if you don't get some way to do damage, the Brittle's only gonna make the wound damage double. So you need to have someone ready to pounce on that thing. So, okay, I'm stunning that enemy and now they're gonna be brittled. Someone fuck him up. Do it. But you have to be at low health for it. But even then, ignore that. Wound, non-loss wound stun, range 3 is just a good pick. So it doesn't matter what anything else is. Initial 22 wound stun is a good pick. It's a slightly weak for a level 8 card, but it's also just never a bad pick. The bottom is heal 5 self or heal 7 self if you have fire. This might be the only way I might consider benching Unending Torrent or Torment. I didn't get to I'm very sorry I did not get to level 8 with this character on my most recent run. So it's not super fresh. So in that time, I didn't get to this to be able to. But I think this would be the only condition I'd rotate that out. But ultimately, the heal 7 is still really. This is just a good card. Wave of Anguish, attack 4, range 3. It's fine. With wind, it's attack 6, range 3. Attack 6, range 3. You're already a striker here. Then for every 2 damage suffered by the target of the attack, you remove a condition you have and give it to the enemy with no restrictions. That would be utterly hopeless, wouldn't it be? Okay, so we love this card. Wave of Anguish, obviously, I love. And the bottom, move 5, wound self, infuse fire. Come on. The initiative 68 is garbage, but Racked with Pain's initiative 22 is really solid. I'm going to be honest, like the idea of being able to remove a shit ton of your conditions to just dump that on the enemy while also doing a significant amount of damage, it's super helpful. So, God, it's so good. Move 5 and a good strong attack. I love it so much. Obviously, the condition striker picks Wave of Anguish, and the direct damage striker takes Racked with Pain, and the defender takes Racked with Pain because stunning enemies and healing yourself is really kind of what you're about. And Wave of Anguish for the controller. The controller primarily, this is like a direct upgrade to Shared Affliction in terms of the line of transference. This is a direct upgrade to line of transference, allowing you to perform an attack, but instead of an attack 2 that turns up to an attack 4, this is an attack 4 that ramps up to a 6, and instead of removing 1 condition, this is remove 1 condition for every 2 damage. Yeah, so that's really powerful, especially if you have Delayed Malady up with Weight of Anguish. Just dump all your stuff on. I mean, honestly, you don't even need that. It's just really strong. Level 9. I can't talk about it, but all I want to say is, Isaac, your initial end of everything was so broken, and one of my favorite. It's stupid. It is so stupid, but I loved it for the meme. Unfortunately, now we have a nerfed version. Initial 99 loss. Just stays in play forever, but the next time you would become exhausted. Before exhausting, perform attack 5, range 5, target 5. You have ways to exhaust yourself pretty handily, so this is one thing you can time. You basically become a time bomb. It's so fun. It's silly, though. I'm not sure it's... Yeah. Yeah, it's fine. Anyway, the bottom is this initiative, this action can be performed while stunned, which is good. During this round, you are unaffected by negative conditions coming up. You cannot be removed. Very much Delayed Malady on command and Initial 99. So first off, Initial 99, you're definitely going last, but allows you to kind of... remember how I said like Delayed Malady? If you time it, you can do the blah 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 blah. Guess what? Imagine if instead of having to set up a loss and forcing yourself to do it the next 5 turns, if you said, this round, I'm immune to everything, nothing gets removed, and I can act freely with a move 4 baked in, and I can do whatever top half I want paired with it. That's a good card, right? The answer is yes. I do consider that really good. The bottom is just so funny. Also, Initiative 99, the end, makes me laugh. I think that actually... Was that deliberate? And the other one's Redemption. Oh! I need a... Sorry, unrelated. Redemption. Whenever you suffer damage, one enemy within range suffers 2 damage for the rest of the scenario. As long as you're taking more damage and damage and damage, you're making enemies pay for it. Like, 2 damage every time... Oh, man, this adds up so fast. This is one of the best ways to punch out damage especially for like a defender build, but neither there. The bottom, both the end of everything and redemption have loss effects on top. The bottom is remove all curse cards from your deck and your adjacent allies' deck, and shuffle those and add an equal number to the monster deck, which I personally think is hilarious. It's definitely a sideboard card though, because the amount of times you want to bring to a scenario, oh no, we are not cursed, the enemies are, and although, like, sure, fine. Unless you have more reliable ways to curse your deck or to have allies curse their deck, I feel like it's hard to use that, and it's hard to justify a level 9 card on a sideboard card, so you're only taking it if you're taking the top half. So, what actually happens is every build picks the end of everything except for the defender, which picks redemption. So, we're also going to go into builds here. So this is primarily the cards we're going to be picking for the Condition Striker. And in summary, these are the cards we're going to be doing as we level up. Primarily, the Condition Striker is primarily going to focus on giving yourself a bunch of the conditions that are going to do damage, and doing damage and giving enemies those conditions. Very basic, pretty easy to understand, and a good hybrid of everything that this class does well. The Damage Striker is going to mostly be focusing on true damage, like Chained by Spite and some of the others, to just do as much damage as possible, while not necessarily focusing on transferring negative conditions, but a little bit more on healing and taking damage. So the kits are slightly different. They both are clearly strikers, but they have slightly different ways of going about doing it, and it's mostly at low levels roughly the same, but it's kind of branches out at later levels. Keep in mind that the Condition Striker is going to need both fire and air, and primarily the Damage Striker only really wants fire. Then we have the Controller, which primarily only wants wind, but you do have some fire in there. But the primarily source of it is from the sand, and you can see from the level up cards, you're going to be trying to do your best to make sure the enemies are doing nothing, and that you're also applying some general sustained damage and being a general nuisance. And last but not least, we have the Defender build, which is primarily just hit me, daddy. And primarily just healing yourself up, making enemies pay for hitting you, preventing your allies from taking damage, and just all around being the tank of the party, but not in the traditional sense. No shields are involved. So primarily there is the concept of how to play it effectively. Synergies. Anything like Line of Transference or anything that transfers cards like Phantom Limb with Unstable Effigy is incredible. Because you can move forward, infuse air, and a lot of times you can use to set up those cards instead. Move 4, immobilize yourself, infuse air, and then the next round, consume the air and that with either Phantom Limb or you'll need Disarm for Phantom Limb, but and then you can use that with Line of Transference to do attack 4, immobilize, range 3 very easily. This is a combo that can be done very handily at level 1. And Line of Transference, just having the better initiative, is one of those cards that you can use as a way to just kind of pair with any of the cards that allows you to get immobilized or conditions that you do want to get rid of. Because sometimes I poison myself and I want to get rid of it, and I can use Line of Transference as a way to just push that poison off, so I don't need Cleansing Fire's bottom to heal me before I start healing myself. Whenever you use Pleasure in Playing for healing, you might also be able to set up Wound for Infection Purge and Agony of Others, in other words, to do the damage. But sometimes you'll want to use the fire for those to set that up correctly, like Agony of Others, to disarm by using the bottom of Burned at Both Ends. If you use the bottom of Burned at Both Ends, you will be able to move forward, disarm the enemy, and then you can, in the next round, you can just move the card onto them again with like Shared Affliction to give them that disarm again, which is something we love. Burned at Both Ends also is really critical with Phantom Limb, so just keep that in mind, that you can just move forward, disarm yourself, get the big disarm with Phantom Limb, and the funny part is you can also use this with the next round with Shared Affliction to move the disarm off. It's just comedy. I love it. And in general, if you have some of those nasty, annoying conditions, Shared Affliction is usually the best way to get it off, except for Disarm. Disarm, you're definitely going to need to rely to Delayed Malady or the level 9 card, end of everything, but you're level 9, so that's like kind of harder to use. So keep in mind, Stun is one of the conditions that is harder for you to navigate around, but everything else is generally pretty solid. For the most part, the best way to actually effectively nullify enemies is to figure out how the ways I was just talking about of dealing with Immobilize and Disarm and how to move those onto enemies, or how to get them not to affect you. For example, like if you do set up like Infection Purge and Burned at both ends for something like that, those are ones that you don't care if you're disarmed for that. So you can just do the damage, disarm yourself, and then like let that fall off naturally because you are not performing attacks during those rounds while still doing significant amount of damage. So just keep that in your arsenal as well. Perk time! So there is only one perk that you care about. And I mean, there's many perks, don't get me wrong, but the main perk you care about is increase your max hit points by 5. That bottom perk, it is just mandatory. Yeah, it's just really strong. So we obviously picked that first. Removing the negatives and adding Disarm is really strong, and then just removing negatives in general. So that's the general build order. It'll also depend on what your build is and what you're doing, but in general, you don't want negatives. So I do think that adding Disarms is really good. And replacing -1. So that's the general core thing. It depends on what build you're going for. If you're like the Condition Striker or the Controller, you're also going to want to pick up the whenever you long rest, ignore all negative conditions you have. And if you do, they cannot be removed. Something about this also is this card itself allows you to, that says that if you long rest while poisoned, you still heal too. Just a heads up. So I feel like there's other really neat things that we can also. It means that you can heal too while wounded, while not having the wound fall off. So food for thought there, that one ends up being really critical for those builds. I do think that for the Raw Striker and the Defender builds probably don't. It's not as imperative. The True Damage Striker might need it for like the Agony of Other stuff, but it doesn't necessarily need to go that way. Ignore scenario effects is also pretty strong, but they sometimes, like, even though they sometimes give you bad stuff, a lot of times you don't have the cards in play to use the bad stuff against the enemies, so I just rather ignore the effects. At that point, the boring stuff, replacing the zeros and rolling is pretty good. The replacing the -2 is normally something I'd prioritize, but I have it as pretty low priority because it replaces the -2 with a -2, but double Curse, which would be cool, but Curse doesn't really have much synergy with you, and a lot of the builds that do want to take damage, Curse actually prevents the damage from being dealt, so it kind of goes both ways. I don't think it's a bad one. I think it's a very good perk, but I don't think it's incredibly high priority. And the one thing I do want to add is that Agony of Others one, the Condition Striker, the replace one +0 card with one add +1 attack, or not replace one, add 1 +0, add 1 attack for every negative condition card. The Condition Striker really wants that, but a lot of the others don't necessarily want it as much. So just a heads up, that's going to be low priority for all other builds except for that build, which will be higher ability. I do think that whenever you become exhausted, Curse crap is largely garbage and can be ignored. Comment if you disagree or something. I don't know. Like, seriously, I've never wanted it, and then the amount of times I exhausted was minimal, and it was already at the end of a scenario. Like, when's it really going to pay off? Unless it says, like, put a curse on top of the enemy deck. Like, imagine if, like, every time you exhaust, put 2 curses on top of the enemy deck. I'd be like, I'll pick that, because then I can, like, save my friends. We're probably in a crappy situation, but, like, they're shuffled, they're not reliable. It's usually at the end of a scenario. Not feeling it. But otherwise, that's generally how you want to play the perk order and Masteries. So the Masteries. So the damage one is definitely, I think, the harder one to get. You need to. I do think that ways of doing it with like brittle hammer potion and other stuff like that, with bouncing them onto enemies, and agony of others, just kind of doing as much damage as possible. Stacking that is probably the way to do that, or like stacking a bunch of negative conditions on yourself and then using the agony of others top, where you can do a bunch of damage to multiple enemies and yourself depending on the number of negative conditions you have, because it says to deal damage, so you deal damage to yourself and you deal damage to a lot of enemies. So there's a few ways to handle it, but I did not get that. I almost got the conditions mastery, except I had a slight problem. Deadly mixture is basically one of the easy ways to get most of those, but you're going to need to find other ways to get them. So first off, I do suggest this with Delayed Malady, because Delayed Malady allows you to build that over several turns. So you can get Muddle from an enemy, but you probably can just do it very easily with Unending Torment, I think. Yes, the bottom of Unending Torment. Depending on the enemies, if you do need to gap fill some conditions, Chained by Despair is a good way to gap fill a lot of them. And if you need Bane, Hopelessness is basically your only way of Bane unless you have an enemy. And last but not least, you need to find some way to get Brittle. And that's the part that usually ended up screwing up with me. But if you are fighting an enemy if you have Chained by Despair and Hopelessness, chances are the rest of your kit with a deadly mixture, you can very easily slack all the conditions once you get brittled and get this mastery pretty easily. There's a lot of snow imps, so I don't think that's necessarily hard, but that's generally the way I'd say the go-to for pulling this out. That plus Delayed Malady, which let me know if you've ever done this mastery without Delayed Malady. I don't think it's possible, but I'm sure someone out there. Well, hold on. An imp brittles you while you have Chained by Despair up. Then you drink deadly. Yeah. You can do it without it, but it's very RNG, whereas you have a lot more control out the other way. So, but that's generally about it. So that tells you exactly how to build it, a few ways of how to play, get the setup rolling, and as well as a few builds. So, and perks. So thank all of you. I talked for way too much, but this is one of the classes I played more recently and loved. So. If you can't tell, sometimes if I'm more like into the class, I'll probably talk more on it. And to that I say, very sorry, but I'm very happy to be back. I mean, really on that note, I did have to take a mental health vacation after a hospital visit, not Grippy Sock Hospital, but like a normal hospital. But no, it's been. I've said it in Discord, but I think generally people know it's been a little rough, but taking a hiatus I think was mandatory for me, and I'm glad to be back. So I hope that the guide was helpful. If you really enjoyed the class or just the guide in general, leave a comment, drop a like, it really helps. And if you want to support us, obviously there's Patreon. And patrons, I'm very sorry, basically. I was like, hey, I'm working on this, and I didn't drop any videos. So we will give you, because we're switching to a 1 month cycle, we're going to be sure to give you earlier access to the videos once they get immediately edited, and there's going to be less of a hurry to only have a small window of early access. I am going to let you guys vote for what the next video is, so obviously if patrons are watching this right now, once this video is posted, I'm going to have a guide of a vote up, but I'm going to leave that vote up until after, so we can maybe let new patrons come in who want to support, who also want to vote on the direction of the channel. But thank you so much for your support. It really does mean a lot. The fact that so many of you stuck around despite the hiatus really means a lot. So thank you so much, and thanks all of you for all of your support and the wonderfulness that is in the Gloomhaven community, and thank you for watching. I should have written better notes for myself so I wouldn't have to think while recording. Stephanie's like, oh my goodness, she's being really annoying right now. I'm sorry, Stephanie. Thank you for editing the video. You're wonderful. I'll get you Cold Stone Creamery. Okay. If you get to this point in the video, just walk over to me and stare at me. Say nothing, and I'll order it. Sorry. I got distracted by my computer. Oh, hold on. The Defender build, which is primarily hit me daddy, and that's no shields were harmed in the making of this tank. just the tank getting harmed repeatedly, but they like it. So that's okay. We don't kink shame in this house. Stephanie's gonna stab me.
With a knife!